Good morning and welcome to the David and David on Real Estate podcast. We are back with Samir Amini, and today we're going to be talking about something that really hasn't been talked about very much. And we're going to be talking about the RECO audit, the big one, the RECO audit. So, Samir, thanks so much for joining us. I know you love looking behind the scenes. I know you love, really diving in and really peeling back the layers. And this is something that we as an industry really haven't talked about that much.
That is so true. For those of you that don't know, you should know some facts here. RICO is a government body. They were created in 1997. They're a nonprofit. The idea of RICO is to make sure that realtors, brokerages, they all follow rules because we are governed by these rules. We have to make sure we act accordingly. Now, from time to time, even places like RICO that mandates rules on others also have to be checked and looked into to see, are they really doing their job properly. And what's fascinating, and I don't remember the last time RICO got audited, but this is recent. So this report that was done by the Auditor Governor General that was done on RICO. This report came out in November 2022.
Wow.
And if you remember, David Corman as well, that TRESA became effective as of December last year.
Right.
However, the original date was supposed to be. Do you remember when the original was supposed to be?
Yeah, it was a year before that, pretty much.
Exactly, it's like around the April of last year,
April. Yeah.
around that. But it didn't. There's not enough done, or it wasn't complete, so it got delayed till December. Now, this report came out November 2022. So the timing here is completely tied to one another in terms of what happened at the audit and what came out of it. And I think as a summary, there were 25 recommendations that were made by the auditor, and there were 63 action items that were recommended that RICO takes. So it's fascinating. Have y'all had a chance to read through it as well, some of it?
You know, I,
Yeah.
s- I summarized the report. I read through it, probably the first 10 pages, and it's everything that, it's funny because I read the report and, we run a busy brokerage. We've been through some audits and, not that I want to say anything negative about RICO, but, the
Yeah.
last audit that we had scheduled at the brokerage, um, RICO just didn't show up. They didn't call us. They didn't email us. They just did not show up. And when we called our auditor, she didn't respond to us. So, I read the report and every single point in there, I actually resonated with.
Yeah, I have the same exact feeling, unfortunately. David Cora, have you had a chance to read through it?
Yeah, you know what? We have go through audits in the law business as well. We have a law society of Ontario that governs our industry, and they do, and we're subject to spot audits, and you're going to have one, and anybody that's had one, like the experience is never pleasant, and they give you no notice, and they make some ridiculous recommendations sometimes, but you have to take it seriously. And every once in a while, I think it'd be like someone has to audit the auditors, the way they're
Correct.
doing their program, because they sometimes they just don't understand what's really going on the street and in the practicalities of running a business. I remember the law study came in our office once, and one of the recommendation was, any time that you're acting for a married couple on the purchase of a property, they should be signing something that they should be getting independent legal advice, or they're waiving their opportunity for independent legal advice because they're each entitled to their own lawyer. And I'm thinking, like, what? Like, nobody in the history of residential real estate, when a married couple bought a house, not selling in a divorce, but buying together, has ever had separate lawyers acting for them, nor should they ever need that. And yet they decided we should have that discussion with them that they should have separate representation, but they can waive that. So we have to create an additional piece of document that's now a standard document. And I'm thinking, like, this auditor has never closed the deal. Like you get in some ridiculous things sometimes.
It's a
But at
really
some
great
point, it's good to
example.
have the auditors audited. So I'm glad that there's an audit of RECO too, because it's cleansing. You have to go through these systems.
Absolutely. I think out of the 25, I've highlighted maybe four that stood out to me. Should we share, talk about some of them?
Yeah, please, let's
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, right. Okay. So one of the ones I highlighted, it literally said RECO does not currently have a process in place to periodically monitor whether its inspectors that inspect brokerages conduct compliance inspections consistently and effectively.
Yeah.
And they have not updated the checklists of its inspectors that the inspectors use to carry out the inspections. Those checklists have not been updated since RECO's inception.
Wow.
Yeah, what stood out to me, Samir, is that they found that each inspector imposes different set of fines for the same circumstances. And to me, that's just, it's such a blatant um, breach of any sort of duty of care and like the whole idea that sentences are imposed consistently for the same actions by the same people. Like, I mean, it's such a basic staple of rights and making sure that rules are applied the same and fines are applied the same in situations. And when I read that, it was a real head scratcher for me.
This is what I call the failure of scaling correctly and properly. This is one of the failures of it. Whereas when you don't have a proper procedure for everybody to follow, it's now you're almost getting this idea that, oh, I'm gonna pray and hope that my inspector is so and so. Oh, I'm gonna pray and hope that it's not this person because you could get off easily or not easily. And I think that is a huge red flag for me that stood out. And I just wanted to highlight that. So I believe what could happen from this is that now RECO's response was, for sure, we're going to completely change and update. And I think what's going to happen is, and before I add that, I was going to add something else. I follow RECO on their Indeed job page. And when I say I follow them, I mean I have set up alerts. So when RECO posts a job, I get alerted. And to my finding, they have had enough job postings for inspectors, for different people at different levels of the industry of their organization to be hired, and they've had job postings, job postings, job postings. And this I'm talking about just last year. Even today, this few months of this year, I've seen job postings from RECO. So I think the idea now is they're definitely upping their game in terms of stricter inspections and the inspections being uniform, actually giving it a meaning that, okay, if a brokerage had a shortfall, what actually should happen? What should be defined? And defining some of them. So the inspectors are not out of their whim, just calling a shot.
Which is good. I mean, I think we need that as an industry. And I for me, I always look at the bigger picture. I look at the landscape where we're at and what's happening, and the NAR settlement and Tressa and so many other things. And sometimes I think to myself, would some of these things have been avoided if RECO was um, run better for the last 10 years or run differently? How would that have shaped our industry? How would that have shaped some of the processes and some of the things that, realtors are experiencing today? And their mandate, like, is to protect the public.
That is true. Absolutely. There's
I
another
think
one that stood
RECO,
out to me. They've gone ahead.
yeah, I think RECO could have benefited from Samir teaching them how to scale up and have their systems evolve over the years instead of doing things the same way they did 20 years ago.
I say this one sentence, everyone, that if you really, really want to be good at scaling, you have to become a really good manual, the manual instructions that you get for making a table. You have to be a really good author of those types of manual instructions. And you have to be detailed, and it has to make sense. And by the time I'm finished, the table has to be standing, working properly. So Okay, back to the recommendations. There's
Amir,
another one.
you're gonna laugh here because
Yeah.
my first instinct was like, well, they should talk to IKEA, right? But it's like, no, you know what? There's somebody who actually does it a little bit better. And my
Okay.
7-year-old son taught me this. He's a Lego fanatic.
Oh, amazing.
Anytime he builds these crazy Lego sets, I have books that are this big, and sometimes they'll have this crazy picture, and the picture is like this one piece goes right here, and then turn the page, and I'm like, wow, they just wasted a whole page on like one move. In my head, I'm like, man, I would have like tried to like get 4 pieces on that one page, but then I'm like,
Correct.
but they're really, you can't go wrong if you follow the manual.
When
Right.
you think it's
Even an
when you think
8-year-old can complete this crazy Lego set.
when you
But
think
you
something is
skip
dummy
that
proof,
move, you're
it's
screwed.
It's screwed.
yeah.
You're screwed.
When you think something is dummy proof, it's not. Okay, so one of the other recommendations that stood out was it literally said the fines that are given out by the RECO discipline committee on agents that commit offenses or misconduct are often lower than the commissions earned on that deal. And they said that there's not a formal fine, like there's not a framework on that is formally set on what to fine, how much to fine for what exact misconduct, and the severity of what they did to that client. None of that is taken into consideration. So they actually put up a chart. I'm just going to pick one example from that chart. In a chart, they gave an example of an agent who was listing a property, and they took a buyer and multi-represented them, knowing that the buyer is currently in a buyer representation agreement with someone else. Knowing that in writing, they said, that's okay, come by. They did the deal, they put it together, and it got to RECO. And what happened is the commission that was earned on that deal was $37,500, and RECO fined the agent $9,000. And so the auditor is saying, and they gave multiple examples, by the way, I think 10 examples of this, where the commissions that were earned by the severity of the misconduct that happened, the fines were almost nothing for the agent and made no impact for them to learn from anything. And so that
In
was
fact,
actually one of the big things.
in fact, they profited from committing the crime,
Right.
basically.
Right.
Crazy.
Exactly.
So
It should have been the full commission plus something else, because it has to act as a deterrent for committing the same offense. It's no, I can, all I got to do is give up a third of my commission and I can keep doing this offense.
that's right. And so RECO's response was because one of the trust rules actually allowed the RECO discipline committee to now have new powers. And the new powers mean that the discipline committee can now say, you know what? Your registration is now suspended or revoked. They did not have that power before, but now they do as a direct result of making sure that depending on the severity, that there is a much stricter punishment that is applied. So that was a fascinating one to me. There's another one, and this one I think we've seen a huge effects of. So it says consumers, actually not this one. Let me pull, yeah, this one, number 20 is a recommendation number 20 that said there was a survey done from July 2021 on individuals that recently purchased the property. And they found on the results of the survey that 89% of Ontarians surveyed are not even aware of RECO. And 85% were not even aware of RECO, never heard of it. And 65% didn't even know that agents or brokerages in real estate are regulated.
Wow.
Isn't that shocking discovery? That to me shows and points to the fact that when agents deal in any transaction, they never almost go through explaining the idea of what working with a realtor means. That one-page blurb that we had, that's never truly properly explained. And I think that item on the auditor's list, I think, sparked the whole idea behind RECO information guide. which is the 13-page document that we must
I was
now
gonna say,
explain.
yeah, I was just gonna say exactly the same thing. Now it makes sense why RECO's mandating the RECO information guide, why
Right.
RECO in big letters is plastered on the cover, why it, talks to the consumer step by step of what RECO is, what rights do they have for the complaint process at the end, why all that is now put into writing.
And
And it's
now
not just
the
giving
idea,
it out. You're supposed to give it out and you're supposed to explain it and discuss it, right? It's a two-step process.
you actually have to get proof that you explained it. Like they can refuse to sign and acknowledge, but you actually have to have some sort of a proof that you explained and gone through it.
Right.
So another one that stood out was they actually said and they found that agents often double end the deal to earn more commission. However, they truly don't explain the impacts of being in a multi-representation scenario to the clients involved. And so the clients feel, less protected. And a lot of them don't even understand what it means to be in the situation. So this item triggered that with the trust rules, before we now get even into a multi-rep, there are now two extra documents that we have to go through with each buyer and the seller to say, look, we're about to get into a situation. Can you sign that you understand and you want to get into it? So again, that triggered another level of step for us to do. There was one more that stood out here that said, and this is a controversial one, and I know David, if you have the time for this, but I'll go through one more. It
Okay.
literally said that consumers put themselves at risk when they're making an offer with no conditions. So they're almost sometimes pushed to say, put a firm offer or you're going to not get the property. So now
Right.
what they're suggesting, and the auditor suggested,
Right.
just like in British Columbia, they have cooling off period, that they bring that same idea here. And I think that's one of the controversial things that's coming up in trust that phase 3 changes. So what do
Oh,
y'all think?
they're actually doing it, Samir?
They're trying to bring it. They're trying to bring it, but REA and everybody else is trying to fight against this change to be brought because they're saying that it's going to be a lot more negatives for having this instead of having positives. The negatives are going to outweigh the positives, absolutely, for the cooling off period. Now imagine your property got multiple offers. Now the top offer that came and you accepted also put two other offers same night on two other properties.
Yeah, and that
All
happens.
the offers
Right.
got accepted, and now they pick and choose.
Right. They
In the
pick and
perfect
choose.
world,
It's a problem. I don't like that system. Like the cooling off period for new construction condos is different because the project's not going to be built for 3 years, 5 years. So there's time for the parties to deal with time. If they turn it down 10 days later, the builder's got lots of time to sell to the next person. It's not the same in the resale industry. And that's a great point, Samir. Like, what's prevent any buyer from making offers all over the place and putting up deposits too? Because when they can just pull their money out, they're just tying up a bunch of properties and giving themselves a chance to pick and choose which one they really want. Like, I don't see it happening.
It's almost like they can renegotiate. They can say, "Hey, if you want me to stay, drop the price by 20,000, or I'm leaving."
and now there's no competition because
Right.
the offers that they were competing with, lost
They
interest or changed their
Correct.
minds, went on to other properties. So they just, hey, yeah, I'll buy this. And oh, you know what? I'm changing my mind, to keep me in the deal, give me $50,000 off. So I think it's inherently unfair towards the sellers.
Correct. Correct. So this audit had all these so many recommendations for those of you that have not read this. You can literally Google this and you can find this report. It's public information. You should definitely have some idea of what happens in the industry behind the scenes because the real changes that impacts you comes from these types of audits.
Yeah, Samir, I think we're gonna have you come
Absolutely.
back because we got more to
Amazing.
talk to. Like, there's so many things in here that are really interesting and how they're going to shape the future of the industry. And I can't wait to see the next audit 2 3 years from now or however long that's going to be to see if some of this worked, right? But I think we got to get you back because some of these are really interesting to go through.
Amazing. Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you, Samir, for your time. It was great to have you on. And we will have you back with your permission, of course. But thank you for having these conversations and giving everybody a glimpse into some of the behind the scenes and with this RECO audit, we're really talking about behind the scenes of behind the scenes.
Exactly. I absolutely loved it. Thanks again, all.
Thank you, Samir.
Thanks, Samir.
Great day. Bye-bye.
Have a good one.